I bought the cabin because I wanted peace. Nothing grand, nothing flashy, just a small wooden retreat nestled deep in the pines near Lake Hallie. A 2-hour drive from the city, it sat on a gravel road only locals or the tragically lost ever used. No Wi-Fi, no cell towers, just a wood-burning stove, strong coffee, and a damn good reason to disconnect. I figured it would be a place to recharge. Somewhere to breathe without sirens, schedules, or the suffocating politeness of city neighbors. What I didn't expect was that I'd be trading that chaos for a more refined form of hell. HOA Karen. Technically, her name was Linda. But let's be honest, there are women named Linda, and then there are Karens who go by Linda. She was the self-appointed enforcer of the neighborhood's Homeowners Association, though I later found out she was neither elected nor technically even on the HOA board anymore. Details, right? What mattered was that she had a clipboard, a deep sense of entitlement, and binoculars that seemed surgically attached to her skull. I met her the second weekend after I bought the place. I just finished stacking the last of the firewood when I heard the sound of tires crunching on my gravel drive. An unfamiliar white SUV crept up like it was hunting deer. Or communists. The windows rolled down halfway, and there she was, late 50s, platinum bob, oversized sunglasses, and the kind of smile that made your skin itch. "You can't park that here," she said, gesturing vaguely at my car. "This is common space." Now, I've got a lot of flaws. I procrastinate. I'm borderline addicted to strong espresso, and I definitely own more books than I'll ever read. But I never park on common space. My car was on my gravel driveway, 10 feet from my cabin, 30 from the road. Still, she stood there like I'd dumped nuclear waste in her bird bath. I smiled politely. "Pretty sure this is my land." She ignored that. "I'm Linda. I manage things around here. You must be new. We have standards, you know. No unregistered guests. Quiet hours after 9 p.m. And definitely no illegal modifications." I looked down at the solar lights I'd just stuck in the ground, $1.20 for a 6-pack from Home Depot. Apparently, this was a violation of sacred architectural harmony. I kept it civil. I smiled, thanked her for the warm welcome, and went inside. She didn't leave for another 10 minutes. Just sat there in her car, writing something down. Things escalated about 2 weeks later. I was up at the cabin with my brother and a couple of college friends for a quiet weekend. Emphasis on quiet. We grilled, played cards, listened to vinyl records, and made the terrible mistake of laughing slightly after 9 p.m. At 9:17 p.m., to be precise, the sheriff showed up. Small-town cop, probably in his late 20s, eyes tired like he was already done with the day. He said he got a call about a rowdy, possibly illegal gathering at my address. I stared at him. "We're playing Scrabble." He looked past me. Sure enough, a bottle of whiskey sat next to the board, but no one was drunk. Hell, Derek was halfway through a TED Talk about moral relativism. The sheriff cleared his throat, clearly embarrassed. "Yeah, doesn't look like anything's going on here. Sorry to bother you." I asked him who made the call. He hesitated. Anonymous tip. Right. But the cabin community wasn't exactly Manhattan. There were only 7 other cabins within earshot. And only one of those cabins had a front porch with direct line of sight to mine, Linda's. The next morning, I found a printed note taped to my door. "This is not a party zone. If you can't respect the rules, maybe this isn't the place for you." It wasn't signed, but it was printed in 16-point Times New Roman and laminated. So, you know, Linda. Out of curiosity, and because I didn't like being spied on, I did a walk around later that week. That's when I noticed the camera. Hidden behind a birdhouse on the edge of her property, it faced directly toward my cabin, angled just enough to accidentally film my front porch, driveway, and anyone coming or going. Nice. Technically legal, since it was on her property and not audio recording, but very creepy. I knew I needed to start documenting things, just in case. I set up a cheap dash cam, pointed toward her property. Nothing intrusive, just enough to keep a digital eye out in case she tried anything else. And surprise, surprise, she didn't like that one bit. 2 days later, I found another note. "Recording your neighbors without consent violates privacy and HOA guidelines. Remove it immediately." Again, no signature. I checked the HOA bylaws. There was no rule against recording from your own driveway. In fact, Linda had conveniently overlooked the fact that she was recording me. I was annoyed, sure, but mostly I was patient, because Linda didn't know something very important. She still thought I was just another city kid playing mountain man, a quiet guy with a flannel shirt and a bad sense of boundary lines. What she didn't know, couldn't possibly know, was that I don't let things go. Not when I'm being harassed. And especially not when someone calls the cops on me for the crime of owning a Scrabble board and a whiskey bottle. It happened on a Tuesday. I'd taken the week off to finish some remote design work. The peace and quiet was perfect for productivity, until I stepped outside around noon to take a call and stretch my legs. That's when I saw her standing at the end of her driveway, phone in hand, watching me. I ignored her. 5 minutes later, a sheriff's cruiser pulled up again. This time it wasn't the friendly young deputy, it was his boss. Older guy. Mustache thick enough to have its own jurisdiction. He asked to speak to me. Said there'd been a report of a suspicious man on the property, possibly squatting or trespassing. I stared at him for a full 5 seconds. Suspicious man? This is my cabin. I own it. He looked at my license. Looked at the property tax records on his tablet. Yeah, he said finally. That checks out. Then he sighed. Sorry. We've had a few false calls from the same source lately. You wouldn't happen to know a Linda Jensen? I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. He just nodded. And that's when I decided, enough. Linda wasn't just a nosy neighbor anymore. She wasn't just an annoying HOA busybody with a clipboard fetish. She was calling 911 on me, weaponizing the police to play out whatever weird control fantasy she had. And if that's how she wanted to play, then fine. But she was going to regret it. Because while I might look like a chill, flannel-wearing millennial, I've got 2 very useful skills. First of all, I don't forget. Secondly, and I know how to make things look like karma. And Linda? She was overdue. There's a special kind of pleasure in watching someone dig their own grave in real time. Linda had the shovel, the attitude, and, lucky me, the inability to keep her mouth shut. I didn't just want to get her off my back. I wanted her to lose the thing she worshipped most, her authority. And for people like Linda, authority means status, control, reputation. Destroy that, and the rest comes crumbling down. So, first step, figure out where she gets her power. The HOA was the obvious choice. But here's the kicker. When I requested a copy of the HOA records from the actual board president, a man named Dave who sounded permanently exhausted, I found out Linda wasn't even a current board member. She'd resigned over a year ago. I mean, she still shows up to meetings, Dave muttered on the phone. She likes to talk. A lot. But yeah, she's not official. So all this time she'd been strutting around with a clipboard, barking rules like some dollar store dictator, and she had zero authority. That was checkmate in the making. I requested every HOA violation notice ever filed by Linda Jensen. Took me a few days and a bribe in the form of a bottle of bourbon dropped off at Dave's porch. But I got them. She'd submitted dozens of complaints. Most were petty, improper curtain color, unregistered guest, grass length exceeding 2.5 inches. But 3 stuck out, because they involved false 911 claims. Apparently, I wasn't the first. There was a family from out of town who rented cabin number 6 last summer. Called in for suspicious activity. Turned out to be a dad and his 2 kids playing catch. A retired veteran with PTSD in cabin number 3. She called 911 because he looked agitated. He was gardening. And now me, trespassing on my own land. Pattern established. Harassment, misuse of emergency services, impersonating an HOA official. Things were adding up fast. Remember that birdhouse camera I noticed on her property? I finally got a chance to see what she was recording. You see, while Linda had a good eye for confrontation, she had zero understanding of technology. That camera? It was a cheap model from a hardware store, and like most people who buy these things, she never changed the default Wi-Fi password. A quick scan, a little public Wi-Fi sniffing, and boom, I was in. I didn't touch or alter anything. I'm not an idiot. But I watched. I downloaded. And what I found? Gold. Not only was she recording my property, often zoomed in on my guests, but she had folders labeled with cabin numbers. She was recording everyone. One file was just 14 minutes of a couple 2 cabins down arguing over what pizza to order. Another was a woman unloading groceries, recorded for nearly 10 minutes. Creepy wasn't even the word. But here's where it gets good. I found a video from the day she called 911 on me. You could see me standing on my porch, holding my phone, talking calmly. I never left my property. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't waving anything. I wasn't doing a damn thing but pacing and sipping coffee. And still, on that same day, she's seen dialing 911 and saying, "There's a man pacing outside. He's acting erratic. I think he's high or something. He doesn't belong here." All recorded. This was the part one enjoyed most. Because while I was scrolling through her public-facing Facebook page, purely for research purposes, I found something interesting. Linda worked for a real estate agency. Not just as a receptionist. Either, she was listed as a community outreach specialist, whatever the hell that means. Lots of pictures of her at local events, shaking hands with city council types, always smiling like she just smelled fresh gossip. And her agency? They prided themselves on community trust and ethical housing practices. Bingo. I dug deeper. Looked at recent client reviews. A few complaints were floating around, nothing damning, but a pattern of aggressive behavior, overstepping boundaries, and unprofessional conduct. Then I checked LinkedIn. One post, a few weeks old, had her bragging about volunteering with local law enforcement for safety oversight. She was clearly inflating her ego online, claiming informal police involvement, suggesting she was tight with the HOA, all while playing a suburban vigilante. She was trying to build a brand, Neighborhood Protector TM. All it would take was a push to collapse that little empire of hers. Here's what I did next. I filed a formal complaint with the HOA citing harassment, misuse of authority, and unauthorized surveillance. I attached time-stamped videos, including the one showing her making a false police report. I included quotes from the sheriff who'd warned me about her. And, because I believe in dramatic flair, I mailed a physical copy to every member of the HOA board, including Dave. Next, I wrote an anonymous tip to her real estate agency, attached the same video footage, pointed out that someone claiming to represent their brand had been calling the cops on homeowners based on lies. I used polite, professional language. I even opened with, "This may be a misunderstanding, but I thought you should be aware." Then I created a brand new Gmail account and sent the footage to a local neighborhood watch Facebook group, where Linda had been posting security alerts. The video of her calling 911 on me for no reason? It went viral. Well, viral enough for a sleepy lakeside community. Within 48 hours, people were talking. By Friday afternoon, I was up at the cabin again, stacking some wood, when I saw it. Her white SUV rolling up the drive. She didn't get out. She just stared at me, sunglasses on, but her jaw clenched so tight I could hear the grinding from 50 feet away. I waved. She reversed and sped off like I'd just exorcised her property line. Then, around sunset, I got a call from Dave, the HOA president. "You did all that?" he asked. "I submitted a formal complaint," I said casually. "Everything I sent was true." He was quiet, then said, "Yeah, you might want to pour yourself a drink. It's going to be an interesting week." And oh, it was. Monday morning rolled in like a hangover, thick with tension and just a hint of smoke from the nearby chimneys. But I wasn't nursing regret. I was sipping coffee, stretched out on my cabin porch, watching the emails roll in like a man enjoying the calm before a very deserved storm. The video had made rounds. And Linda? She wasn't just in damage control. She was in freefall. Dave called again. This time, he didn't sound tired. He sounded nervous. "She showed up to the emergency meeting this morning," he said. "She's not on the board." I reminded him. "I know," he said. "That's what we told her." Apparently, Linda had marched into the HOA clubhouse like she owned the place, ranting about how she was being cyber-bullied and framed. She demanded they take action, on me, naturally. Dave didn't even have to raise his voice. He just handed her a printed packet, my complaint, complete with timestamps, public videos, and the sheriff's informal statements. She kept saying she was protecting the neighborhood, he said. "But the rest of the board? They've had it. You weren't the first." Turns out 2 other cabin owners had submitted grievances after seeing the footage. Linda had been playing big sister for months, spying, nitpicking, filing false reports, and everyone had been too polite or too intimidated to push back. Not anymore. The board passed a unanimous motion to ban her from any formal or informal HOA activity. They stripped her of all access to the shared communication system. No more community emails, no more alerts, no more self-published safety notices printed at her office and slipped into people's mailboxes. They even barred her from attending HOA meetings unless it directly concerned her own property. For someone who craved control like oxygen, that was the first death blow. But fate has a sense of irony. That Thursday, I stopped by the local grocery store to grab some beer and steak. Small place, 2 aisles, a flickering freezer light, and a bell on the door that sounded like a dying cat. I was in line, paying, when she walked in. Linda. Same sunglasses. Same pressed white jacket. But her hair was disheveled, and she looked smaller, like someone had let the air out of her ego. She saw me, froze, and then, of course, she marched straight up. "You think this is over?" she hissed. I turned, calmly, holding my grocery bag. "I think it's just getting started." "You're harassing me," she snapped, loud enough for the clerk to pause mid-scan. "What you did, sending that video, it's defamation. You're going to regret this." I smiled. "You called 911 on me. Twice. Lied. You recorded your neighbors without their consent. You claimed to be a board member when you weren't. You don't understand how things work around here," she snapped. That one made me laugh. "Actually," I said, "I think I understand them perfectly now. People like you operate on fear. You bully, you lie, and you count on nobody pushing back. But you picked the wrong guy." Her jaw twitched. The clerk was trying not to stare, but the whole store had gone quiet. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't even angry. Just calm. Measured. I could have been reading a grocery list. "You cost me everything," she hissed. I stepped closer, lowered my voice to a near whisper. "Not yet." And then I left. The next day, it happened. I didn't know how fast the agency would move. I figured maybe a warning, a HR slap on the wrist, a short-term suspension. I hadn't even expected much. But Linda had made it personal. Turns out, she'd been warned before about her behavior in the community. A past client had raised a similar concern after she'd shown up unannounced to check on property standards. She'd skirted discipline by blaming it on confusion. That video, though, hard evidence. According to a friend I'd made in town, someone who worked part-time in the same office building, Linda had a full-blown meltdown in the agency lobby. Screaming, crying, threatening lawsuits, demanding to speak to corporate. Her manager's response? He handed her a termination letter and asked her to return her company keycard. She was fired on the spot for conduct damaging to the agency's reputation and misuse of law enforcement as a private tool of intimidation. The local Facebook group lit up that night. Some defended her. Most didn't. Comments flooded in. About time someone stood up to her. She called the cops on my teenage son for loitering by the lake. She always acted like she owned the whole damn mountain. One user, anonymously, posted the job termination letter. I didn't ask how they got it. But I wasn't done. Not because I was cruel, but because people like Linda don't learn unless the mirror shatters so completely they can't pretend it's still whole. So I mailed her one final package. No note. No return address. Just a thumb drive with a file named "The Neighborhood You Try to Control." Inside, a montage of her greatest hits. All video footage. Time-stamped. Narrated by me. In a calm, sarcastic voice, I walked viewers through her greatest offenses like it was a nature documentary. Here we observe the suburban Karen in her natural habitat, filming from behind a bush, trembling with faux moral superiority. I know she watched it, because 2 days later, she put her cabin up for sale. You'd think losing her position in the HOA and getting fired from her job would have been enough. For anyone normal? Absolutely. But for Linda? This was about power, image, control. So when that unraveled, she didn't go quietly. She tried to reclaim the narrative, tried to paint herself as the victim. She started by showing up at church events, dropping cryptic comments about being targeted by outsiders. Then came the pity posts. Some people thrive on tearing down others, she wrote, under a photo of a black coffee and a Bible verse. Very subtle. She even tried to start a Concerned Citizens Watch group via Facebook, posting old articles about crime from a neighboring town as if civilization was on the brink of collapse. But it was like watching someone flail in quicksand. And I was happy to let her sink. A few days after her firing, a for sale sign went up in front of Linda's cabin. Cute little sign. Professionally done. Listing price? $585,000. About $80,000 above what she paid 2 years ago. She was clearly hoping to cash out, move somewhere fresh, start over with her dignity reassembled. But here's the problem. She chose my cabin as the one next door. And remember that security footage she'd been capturing illegally for months? The one pointed at my front porch? Yeah, I had copies. So I compiled a lovely little dossier. A PDF, nothing too dramatic. A photo of her surveillance setup. A transcript of her 911 call about me. A summary of her HOA harassment with time-stamped incidents. And a nice screenshot from the HOA meeting minutes where she was officially banned. I titled it, History of Neighbor Conflict, Buyer Awareness Brief. Then, I created a dummy Gmail account with a name like Local Concerned Resident and sent it to the realtor handling her listing. Just a heads up, I said. For the sake of full disclosure. Guess what? 3 scheduled showings canceled in 2 days. By the end of the week, the listing price had dropped $35,000. She took down the for sale sign on Sunday. That was the petty part. Here's where it got strategic. Because Linda hadn't just been fired, she'd also lost her license. Yup. A little birdie from the agency let it slip. The footage and formal complaints triggered an investigation by the State Real Estate Commission. They take things like fraudulent community representation and harassment via law enforcement pretty seriously, especially when it involves using your job as leverage for control over private citizens. Within 2 months, she was permanently stripped of her real estate license, which meant no more agencies, no more clients, no more income. But she didn't know I knew that until I mailed her another envelope. Inside, a printout of the official license revocation notice, public record, and underneath it, a note. Respect is a two-way street. You chose a dead end. There's something about a fallen tyrant that makes people brave. After Linda's collapse, stories started coming out. People who'd stayed silent before now had the confidence to speak up. One neighbor said she once called animal control because his dog barked during a thunderstorm. Another said she reported his teenage daughter for loitering in front of their own mailbox. A third had emails, long, passive-aggressive rants about aesthetic compliance because he painted his deck the wrong shade of gray. So I did what any decent person would do. I created a community website. Harmless, really. A little homepage, a couple sections. HOA guidelines, the truth. Know your rights as a cabin owner. And my favorite, Linda Watch, a timeline. Everything was factual. Everything was public. Everything was documented. I never named her directly, just referred to a certain former self-appointed enforcer. But everyone knew. The site spread. Locals shared it. People referenced it during HOA meetings, laughing. Linda? She went quiet. Deleted her Facebook. Put curtains over every window. Stopped leaving her house unless it was after sundown. A woman who once knocked on doors to hand out reminder notes now scurried like a shadow down her own driveway, head down, avoiding eye contact. Months passed. Summer came. Tourists returned. Cabin owners held BBQs again without worrying about drone footage or anonymous reports. And me? I upgraded the porch. Got a new grill. Installed real security cameras. Not aimed at Linda's place, but I kept the signs facing her lot just for fun. Then one afternoon, as I was splitting wood, I saw a car pull up to her property. A U-Haul. She was finally leaving. Her kingdom, dismantled. Her job, gone. Her influence, erased. I watched from my porch as she loaded box after box, alone. No friends. No husband. He'd left years ago. No community helping her pack. Just Linda, sweating in the sun, dragging a life into cardboard boxes. I didn't say goodbye. I just sipped my coffee, nodded once when she glanced my way, and went back to splitting logs. Linda left Whispering Pines on a Tuesday. No farewell party. No bake sale. No inspirational Facebook quote about new beginnings. Just a silent departure. One U-Haul, 2 wilted ferns, and a face that hadn't smiled in months. She didn't say goodbye to anyone, and no one waved. I watched her taillights disappear down the gravel road, past the cabin she used to monitor, past the mailbox she once inspected like it was a crime scene. And then she was gone. Funny. All that bluster. All that ego. And in the end, she left like a thief in broad daylight. The neighborhood changed almost immediately. A week after Linda's departure, someone hosted a block gathering, impromptu cookout, lawn chairs, coolers, dogs running free. It was the first time I'd seen people smile without glancing over their shoulder. Turns out, Linda had been more than just a nuisance. She was the kind of cancer that metastasized slowly, under the radar. People hadn't even realized how much stress she brought into their lives until the silence returned. No more anonymous complaints. No more HOA rule sheets mysteriously showing up in mailboxes. No more white SUV creeping along the gravel like it was patrolling a war zone. The HOA itself got a facelift. Dave stepped down, finally able to retire without having to manage adult drama. He passed the torch to a local couple, both retired teachers who believed in actual community, not neighborhood tyranny. And that camera she had hidden in the birdhouse? Removed. Smashed, actually, by the new owners. 3 months after Linda left, her cabin sold. Not at the price she wanted, of course. She'd listed it at $585,000. It closed at $462,000. I could have sent her a sympathy card. Instead, I sent one to the new couple who moved in. Handwritten, on decent paper. Welcome to Whispering Pines. Don't worry, your neighbor isn't insane. Anymore. First beer's on me. Cabin number 4-inch. They laughed. We've had dinner twice since. Nice folks. No binoculars. You'd think that after all this, I'd forget about Linda. Just let her fade into the fog of memory. One more petty tyrant cast out to irrelevance. But then I got a LinkedIn notification. She'd made a new profile. Linda Jensen, life coach, community strategist, survivor. Life coach. Let that sink in. I clicked through. Her new business website had a photo of her leaning against a white fence, clearly stock, arms crossed, with a quote underneath. I've been through darkness. Now I help others reclaim their power. I nearly choked on my coffee. There was even a blog, 3 whole posts, each a passive-aggressive ode to dealing with toxic people and rebuilding after betrayal. But here's the kicker. She disabled comments. Of course she had. People sometimes ask, why bother? Why not just ignore her? Move on. Because ignoring people like Linda is how they thrive. They count on your silence. They weaponize your politeness. They rely on your fear of causing trouble, while they set fire to the rules behind your back. But I wasn't built to tolerate tyranny, especially not in flannel. Revenge wasn't about cruelty. It was about restoring balance. She abused power, so I took it from her, piece by piece, until she stood on scorched earth, wondering where all the applause had gone. These days, I still own the cabin, still split my own wood, grill steaks, play vinyl records that crackle like campfires. But now when I sit on the porch, I don't worry about being watched. There's peace here now, earned peace. And sometimes, when the sun starts to set and the lake catches fire in the distance, I raise a glass to the woman who tried to turn my retreat into a battleground. I almost want to thank her, because in exposing her rot, I became something better. A man who doesn't just endure injustice. He ends it. Thank you for being with us. Please share in the comments where you are watching from and whether you liked everything, and see you next time.